Good evening, everyone. My name is Benjamin, and welcome to what we're going to be discussing today, a video on the gubernatorial races for 2022. I'm not going to discuss New Jersey and Virginia, which have their not super in-depth, not today, which both states have their gubernatorial elections this year. And the reason why I'm not is because, honestly, it's pretty clear that the Democrats are going to win both states. I believe it's Phil Murphy or Chris Murphy. I think it's Chris Murphy in New Jersey. He's almost certain to win. And in Virginia, Terry McAuliffe is probably going to win the primary and almost certainly going to win the general election. I may do some stuff about those at some future point. But honestly, both elections are kind of, I have to be unbiased, you know. So there are a few Republicans retiring or that are term limited in this map, and there are two Democrats who are term limited or retiring. So this is our slate. Now, not all of these seats are going to be competitive. California, for example, it's not going to be a competitive race. Well, actually, that kind of depends. Gavin Newsom is not the most popular governor in America. There's a very high likelihood that he gets recalled. I may be talking a little bit more about that and talking about the last time California had a recall election for governor. And it was a total recall. I can't do Arnold Schwarzenegger right now. But yeah, it was a total recall of Governor Gray Davis. Yeah. Anyway. And yes, Arnold Schwarzenegger became governor. The governator. Arizona, Doug Ducey is term limited. We'll talk about that one because that could be a potential flip. Alaska is an interesting one, but I think that'll stay Republican. New Mexico, probably going to stay Democratic. Same with Colorado. Idaho, probably going to stay Republican. Same with Wyoming. South Dakota is going to be interesting. Kristi Noem is going to maybe have a slightly tough time because not all South Dakotans, and not an overwhelming majority, approved of her not locking down or implementing a mask mandate. But a lot approved of it. And she's trying to say that, hey, we didn't do as bad as some states that people are pointing out, and we didn't do anything. We just said we're going to let it run its course. And that may actually, that's going to be interesting because when I'm going to discuss on Friday, most likely, potential go in depth into the Republican primary for 2024 and talk about various people who might become candidates and, you know, what sort of chance they'll have in a general election and kind of do an evaluation there. And we'll talk a little bit more about Kristi Noem there. Nebraska has a term limited Republican, but I genuinely expect that seat to stay Republican. Kansas is interesting. Laura Kelly is the Democratic governor, but she's kind of powerless because Republicans have super majorities in both chambers of Kansas's legislature. Arkansas, almost certain to stay Republican. By the way, flips I'm going to use in a darker color. Georgia is the next interesting state, and actually one that could potentially flip. I'm just going to straight up say it. I don't think Iowa's going to flip, though gubernatorial elections can be extremely weird. Now, the reason why I say Georgia could flip, by the way, Hawaii, no Republicans winning that seat for a very, very, very long time. is because Brian Kemp is not the most popular governor. The state is a hell of a lot more competitive now than it was in 2018 when he almost lost. You know, he almost went to a runoff against Stacey Abrams. Doesn't matter if she runs again or not. The Democrats have proven that they have a very formidable turnout machine. That said, Georgia, Brian Kemp might have a little hope and a prayer of avoiding this situation with the end of no excuse absentee voting, the ending of mail-in voting, if that bill passes. Of course, there's going to be a lot of litigation for that, but I actually don't expect anything to change regarding it, simply because at the end of the day, that's a federalism issue. And the state legislatures can determine the time and place for people to vote. Illinois, not really interesting. Wisconsin, Tony Evers, I think, is actually probably one of the more vulnerable Democratic governors. And the reason I say that is Wisconsin is a state that has been trending towards the Republicans. Yes, Biden flipped it back in 2020, but he won Wisconsin by an even narrower margin than Donald Trump won it in 2016, despite Biden winning nationally by an even wider margin than Clinton, by about 2%. Yeah, Wisconsin is a state that is definitely, I would argue, more favorable to the Republican candidates, certainly than it was in 2016. Possibly 2022 is another example of this. And I would be hard-pressed to say that this isn't competitive. And right now, I would actually, this is one of the few times when I would err against the incumbent in a Republican wave year with a strong campaign from the Republican Party in Wisconsin. I'm going to actually err on the side of it flipping. And I'll call this the first state that I would say is flippable. Gretchen Whitmer, I'm going to tentatively err on the side of her winning re-election, simply because Wisconsin is much redder than Michigan. Michigan was Trump's narrowest win not in terms of percentage. I think that was New Hampshire. In terms of raw votes, it was also New Hampshire. I forget which had the narrower percentage, Michigan or New Hampshire. But Michigan was 12,000 votes in the presidential election. The previous Republican governor was extremely unpopular, and that's how Gretchen Whitmer won her term. But yeah, I genuinely, I would say Whitmer is definitely on the hot seat going into 2022. But I'm going to err on the side that she is going to win re-election. I'm also going to just err on the side of Brian Kemp in Georgia for right now. Minnesota, I'm going to err on the side of Tom Waltz, the incumbent. And in Kansas, I'm actually going to err on the side of Laura Kelly for right now, though I could definitely see Kansas flipping. Arizona, I'll come back to that. Oregon is going to stay Democratic almost certainly. South Carolina is going to stay Republican. Florida, I'm going to err on the side of Ron DeSantis. Texas, I'm going to err on the side of Greg Abbott. Pennsylvania is going to be very interesting. It basically depends on whether Brian Fitzpatrick decides to run for Senate, re-election to the House, or the governor's mansion. And I know people are going to say, well, in your Senate video, you said that it was going to stay Republican, even if Fetterman runs. Fetterman's going to win that seat. Environment matters. Candidate matters. And Pennsylvania Republicans tend to do well in Senate elections if they're supported by the party. And because that is one of the GOP's top priorities is holding that Pennsylvania Senate seat, I don't have a doubt that they're going to recruit the best possible candidate they can get and support them extremely heavily. Now, the governor's mansion is a different story. Their current incumbent is term limited. And I'm just looking at my timer. So it is an open seat election. I don't have a very good knowledge of the bench for either party. The logical step for Fetterman, even though I think he's actually declared for the Senate seat, would have been the governor's mansion, in my opinion. That would have been the logical step. But now there's a bit of a power vacuum at the top for Pennsylvania. This is actually prime territory for a Republican pickup. But I'm not going to say it is. But then again, the national environment, and because I'm currently saying that the Republicans are going to win the Senate election, that said, Pennsylvania is one of the few places where split ticketing still exists. That's going to be an interesting race. Maybe some Pennsylvanian viewers can give me a little bit. But for right now, I'm going to err on the side of no split ticketing. I'm going to say this will be a flip, but it'll be a tough race. Another flip, I'm going to say it right now, since Larry Hogan is term limited. If he wasn't, I would say safe Republican, not even a concern, right? But unless his lieutenant governor runs and Larry Hogan endorses her and campaigns actively for her, that seat is going Democratic. New York, it's going to be interesting. If Cuomo resigns, it's going to be a safe Democratic seat. If he gets primaried and chooses to run for re-election, it's going to be safe Democratic. If he somehow wins a Democratic primary, and makes it to a general, if the Republicans can nominate somebody who is reasonably moderate, maybe has some star power, and is well liked in New York City, maybe they can win. But it's an uphill battle even then. So I'm going to say, yeah, it's almost certain to stay with the Democrats. Basically, the Republicans need everything to go in their favor, and even then they might not win New York. Yes, they are doing better, can be doing better in very rural areas of New York and upstate, but it's a difficult situation for them to actually win it as of the present moment. Connecticut and Rhode Island can flip because typically those Republican parties nominate more liberal and moderate Republicans up in New England, but I'm going to err on the side of the incumbents in both states. Massachusetts, Charlie Baker, if he chooses to run, it's his race to lose. Same thing with Phil Scott in Vermont. His race to lose. New Hampshire, if Chris Sununu decides that he wants to stay the governor, his race to lose. And if he decides to run for the Senate seat, which apparently, supposedly, he may have national ambitions or even presidential ambitions, he might do, this race all of a sudden becomes more competitive. That said, it's a Republican favorable year, and New Hampshire Republicans tend to nominate someone who is more in line with being able to win in New Hampshire. So I would argue that New Hampshire is a state where I'm going to err on the incumbent party. Plus, there's a lot of moving parts in that race. Maine is probably going to stay Democratic, though it is a very competitive. It can be a very competitive seat. It just depends on who the Republican nominee is, and we are still a ways out. Arizona, I'm going to err on the side of the incumbent party, but then again, it is the Arizona GOP, which seems to be self-immolating right now. If you've looked at the infighting, almost like the Nevada Democratic Party is self-immolating. If you've caught the news, I had a video planned for Wednesday, but now I really want to do coverage of Nevada's Democratic Party internal elections for their chair position, vice chair, treasurer, all that stuff, because apparently their party is self-immolated, and the extreme left wing of that party is taken over. Like, not even the progressive wing, the extreme left wing. You know, we're talking about the type that we're talking about people who are actually members of the Democratic Socialists of America. Basically, people who, yeah, I have my own opinions of the Democratic Socialists of America. I don't think they're nearly as democratic as they want to say. Specifically, when you ask a Democratic Socialist, well, what if the people vote to end all these programs? They say, well, why would they do that? I say, well, what if they did? A lot of them, they then revert to, well, we don't end them because they're good for people. Yeah. So it turns out that they are not willing to listen to the will of the people when the will of the people doesn't want what they're selling. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and end it here. I hope you all have a very, very nice evening, and I'll see you all on Wednesday. Take it easy. A like, a comment, and a subscription is greatly appreciated, and I want to thank everybody for getting me above 750. We're going to hit my goal of 800 before my birthday, more than likely. So, I guess let's see how high we can get this year. I'm going to leave it on that terrible phrasing. Take it easy, everyone.